Online dating was supposed to be a game of chance, a place where love could blossom, where strangers turned into something more. At least, that's how the apps advertised themselves. Smiling faces, perfectly lit selfies, promises of compatibility, percentages that never lied. But behind those curated profiles lived shadows no one wanted to admit existed. For every happily ever after, there was a nightmare waiting to unfold. This is where our story begins, not with one victim, but with 13 voices that would never forget the messages, the first dates, and the things that went wrong. Their experiences drift together like pieces of the same puzzle, an unsettling portrait of love twisted into something monstrous. The first match, Samantha, was 23, fresh out of college, and still learning the edges of adulthood. She downloaded the dating app out of curiosity more than anything. Her friends told her it was the new way to meet people, no different than chatting at a bar. The first profile that caught her eye seemed harmless enough. David, 26, works in finance, loves dogs, hiking on weekends. His photos looked real, candid, even one at a coffee shop, one with a golden retriever, one blurry group photo with friends. Their conversation started light, jokes about bad weather, Netflix shows, favorite foods. He seemed funny, attentive, even a little shy. But when Samantha finally agreed to meet him at a downtown cafe, she noticed something strange. The man who walked in looked older. His jaw was harder, his hair slightly thinner. She guessed late 30s, not 26. He waved, smiled, and acted as though nothing was out of place. "It's me," he said casually, as if the years erased from his profile didn't matter. Samantha forced a smile, sat down, and tried to push away her discomfort. But her stomach twisted every time his eyes lingered on her for too long. When she excused herself to the bathroom, she caught him sniffing the straw from her drink. That was the last time she saw him in person. But it wasn't the last time she heard from him. Over the next month, she received messages from strange numbers, all unsigned. "Wish you'd given me a chance. You'll never find someone like me. I'm watching you." Samantha deleted the app, but she never stopped checking over her shoulder. Swipe right into a stranger. Jason thought of himself as cautious. He wasn't naive. He knew the internet could be dangerous, but loneliness has a way of dulling instincts. The girl's name was Lily. At least that's what she told him. Her profile had only 2 photos, both dimly lit selfies, heavy filters, wide, dark eyes. Something about her felt mysterious. Their conversations were short, clipped responses that always pushed toward meeting in person. "Don't you want to see me?" she asked. "Aren't you curious?" They decided on a bar in the outskirts of town. Jason arrived 10 minutes early. He waited and waited. No Lily. At 10:30, he decided to leave. As he walked to his car, he noticed a shape leaning against the far end of the lot. A figure, hood up, staring. He froze, phone in hand. The figure didn't move closer, just watched. Jason unlocked his car and got inside, locking the doors instantly. His phone buzzed. A new message from Lily. "Nice car, drive safe." Jason deleted every dating app that night. But the figure in the parking lot haunted him whenever he thought about trying again. The wrong apartment. Emily's story was different. She matched with a man named Cole, who seemed charming, intellectual, and kind. They talked for weeks before she invited him to her apartment for dinner. She gave him her address without hesitation. That night, she cooked pasta and lit candles, trying to turn her small studio into something romantic. At 8 p.m., there was a knock. When she opened the door, the man standing there wasn't Cole. He was older, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled jacket. His eyes darted past her into the room. "Emily?" he asked, lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. Her blood ran cold. She shook her head and slammed the door. Her hands fumbled as she locked it, heart hammering against her ribs. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Cole. "Why didn't you let me in?" She never figured out who was at her door. Echoes of a pattern. These weren't isolated stories. They were threads, each a different shade, each twisted into the same dark fabric. Some began with innocent profiles, some with fake names, some with matches that never even showed up, but they always ended the same way: fear. The lure of connection hid something darker, and those who trusted too quickly often learned too late. The apps promised safety. They promised love. Instead, they opened doors to shadows. 13 stories. 13 doors. And with each one, the hallway ahead grew darker. Because the worst wasn't the lies, the stalking, or the strangers who pretended to be someone else. The worst was realizing that sometimes, the people who reached out through glowing screens didn't just want your heart, they wanted you. The thrill of online dating often begins with the flutter of possibility, a notification ping, a witty reply, a photo that makes your heart skip. But the early spark quickly dulls when red flags flicker into view, ignored at first, then impossible to unsee. For the 13 voices in this story, those flags weren't warnings, they were omens. The man who never smiled. Tara was 28. When she matched with Ethan, his profile was simple, almost too simple. No flashy bio, just one photo. A man sitting at a kitchen table, face half shadowed. They chatted casually, and although his responses were short, there was something polite about him. When he asked to meet for coffee, Tara said yes. The moment he walked into the cafe, she knew something was wrong. Ethan looked just like the photo, but in person his eyes were hollow, his movements stiff. He never once smiled, not when he greeted her, not when she cracked a joke, not even when he spoke about himself. The entire date felt like an interrogation. He wanted to know her schedule, when she left work, if she lived alone, whether she locked her doors at night. By the time Tara excused herself to leave, her nerves were shredded. She stood up, but Ethan stayed seated, staring at her like she had just failed some unspoken test. Hours later, she received a text. Just 3 words: "You're not ready." She blocked his number. But weeks after, she swore she saw his face reflected in her office building's glass doors, waiting, watching, always unsmiling. Don't tell anyone. Marcus thought he'd found someone special in Allie. She was vibrant online, sending him long paragraphs filled with jokes and flirty emojis. Their first video call was a little strange. Her camera always off, her voice slightly distorted, like she was speaking through static. She claimed her phone was old, the microphone busted. Marcus brushed it off. But when they finally met in person, something clicked in his gut. Allie wasn't the bubbly girl he expected. She was older, sharper, with a temper that sparked out of nowhere. The first time they argued, she leaned in close and whispered, "Don't tell anyone about me. Not your friends, not your family. I'm your secret now." Marcus laughed it off at first until the secrecy turned suffocating. She'd appear unannounced outside his work. She knew where he lived before he told her. She knew things he never shared. When he tried to end it, she sent him a single photo, his own bedroom taken from inside his apartment while he was at work. He never found out how she got in. The red dress Sophie's story still gives her chills. She matched with the man, who insisted on meeting for dinner within the week. He seemed normal enough, though a little pushy. When she arrived at the restaurant, he was already waiting. The first thing she noticed was his grin. Wide, stretched too far like it was painted on. The second was the way his eyes lit up when he saw her. "You wore red," he said. Sophie froze. She was wearing a black sweater. "No," she laughed nervously, tugging at the fabric. "I didn't," but the man shook his head, his grin never fading. "No, I saw you. You were in a red dress last night, right outside your apartment. You looked perfect." Her fork clattered against the table. She hadn't worn red in months. She left without finishing her meal. By the time she blocked his number, she was shaking so hard she could barely type. That night, when she glanced at her window, she swore she saw something fluttering in the shadows. A dress. Red patterns of control, for every story like Sophie's. There were others that followed the same unsettling pattern. The questions that were too personal, too early, the insistence on meeting without delay, the subtle digs that chipped away at confidence, the obsession that turned admiration into surveillance. The victims tried to brush it off, telling themselves they were overreacting, that everyone had quirks, that maybe this was just what dating was now. But ignoring red flags doesn't make them vanish, it only gives them room to grow. And for the 13 voices, those flags soon became traps, because while some online daters were simply awkward or strange, others hid something darker, something that made them dangerous. The kind of people who didn't just want love, they wanted ownership. By the time the red flags were noticed, it was already too late for some. The apps weren't just playgrounds for the lonely, they were hunting grounds. Behind the glow of every profile picture could lurk something far more dangerous than rejection. Predators knew how to play the game. They studied the algorithms, the human psychology, the endless hunger for attention, and then they struck. The collector Rachel thought she was meeting a man named Alex for a casual lunch. His profile was filled with photos of art museums and travel shots, and he claimed to be a collector of antiques. When she arrived at his house, he insisted he cook for her instead of going out. Her unease began immediately. The place was filled wall to wall with mannequins dressed in old clothing, wigs styled in unnatural ways. Their plastic eyes followed her every move. "Don't worry," Alex said, noticing her discomfort. "They can't hurt you." Throughout the night, he wouldn't stop comparing her to the mannequins. Her hair, her eyes, her posture. He asked her to stand in the center of the room so he could see how she looked with the others. Rachel excused herself and fled, leaving her jacket behind. Days later, she received a photo in the mail. It was her jacket, now draped across one of the mannequins. A wig that looked eerily like her hair sat on its head. She moved apartments. She never used the app again. The Woods date Kyle matched with someone who called herself Mara. Her photos were rustic, all taken outdoors. Forest trails, camping trips, wide smiles against sunsets. When she suggested they meet for a little adventure hike, Kyle thought nothing of it. She sent him a pin location outside town. No trail markers, no parking lot, just woods. When he arrived, she was waiting, smiling. Her backpack looked heavier than it should. They walked for half an hour before Kyle realized something was off. Mara never asked him questions. She didn't seem interested in conversation. She just kept glancing behind them. Finally, he asked where they were going. Her smile faltered. "Oh," she said, voice flat. "They'll tell us when we get there." Kyle froze. "Who's they?" Branches snapped in the distance. More than one pair of footsteps. He didn't wait to find out. He bolted back the way. They came. Mara's laughter echoing after him until he reached his car. When he later tried to revisit her profile, it was gone. Wiped clean. The vanishing host Clara had been talking to Ben for weeks. He was charming, witty, a little sarcastic in a way she found refreshing. Eventually, he invited her to his place for dinner. His apartment building was nice, upscale, with a doorman. Everything seemed normal. She knocked on his door. No answer. She texted him. Nothing. When the doorman saw her still waiting after half an hour, he frowned. "Ben?" he asked. "No one by that name lives here." Confused, Clara showed him the texts. The doorman shook his head. "That's not one of our tenants." But someone had sent her photos from inside that very apartment building. Same hallways, same elevator, same door. She left, shaken. Later that night, she received one final message. "Sorry we missed each other. Next time, don't bring anyone with you." Clara hadn't brought anyone. A game of patience. Some predators didn't rush. They waited, weaving their way into lives, slowly. There was Lily, who messaged Daniel every morning for 3 months before suggesting they meet. When he finally agreed, she arrived already knowing the layout of his apartment, the color of his car, the places he liked to shop. There was Brian, who dated 2 women from the same app, both friends who never realized they had been targeted. until the women compared notes and realized he'd been collecting information about them both. And then there were others who played an even longer game, ghosting for weeks, then reappearing each time with more knowledge, more control, until their victims couldn't tell where coincidence ended and obsession began. The apps were supposed to bring people together. Instead, they gave predators everything they needed: names, habits, locations, vulnerabilities. The screen was only ever a mask, and when it slipped, the true faces of hunger, obsession, and violence came through. For the 13 voices, the horror was no longer in the red flags. It was in the realization that the monsters weren't hiding anymore. They were waiting in the open. For some, the danger of online dating never left the screen. For others, it became terrifyingly physical. What started with curiosity ended in rooms they couldn't escape, cars that drove too far, dinners that felt like cages. Predators didn't just stalk from afar. They reached out, touched, cornered. And when the victims realized the danger, the exit was already gone. Locked in. Melanie had always been cautious, but when she matched with Darren, she thought she'd found someone safe. His messages were thoughtful, his voice soothing. He didn't rush her. When he finally asked her to dinner at his place, she agreed. His apartment was clean, almost sterile, with minimalist furniture and no personal photos. Dinner was pleasant. Wine, pasta, laughter. But when she stood up to leave, Darren's tone shifted. "Stay," he said simply. Not a suggestion, a command. Melanie laughed nervously. "I've got work early tomorrow." But when she reached for the door, she found it locked. The key wasn't in sight. Darren leaned against the wall, smiling faintly. "I like when things go my way." Melanie's heart pounded. She excused herself to the bathroom, where she opened the window. 3 stories down, concrete below. She had no choice. She climbed out, scraping her arms as she dropped onto the fire escape, and ran barefoot into the street. When she looked back, Darren was at the window watching, holding the missing key in his hand. The car ride Nick was 30, lonely and tired of first dates that went nowhere. When Jasmine offered to pick him up for their dinner, he thought it was romantic. She was beautiful, charming, and drove a sleek black car that smelled faintly of vanilla. But instead of heading toward the restaurant, she took a wrong turn. "Shortcut," she said. Nick noticed she never turned on the GPS, and when he checked his phone, there was no signal. The shortcut twisted deeper into back roads. His gut twisted with it. Finally, he asked, "Where are we going?" Jasmine's smile didn't waver. "Someplace special? You'll love it." Nick's hand closed around the door handle, but there were no locks on his side. The car sped faster, trees blurring past. When he finally shouted at her to stop, Jasmine's face went blank. "You ruined it," she muttered. She screeched to a halt on a dirt path, ordered him out, and drove away, tires spitting gravel into his legs. Nick walked 6 miles before finding help. When he tried to report her profile, it no longer existed. Dinner. With strangers, Lauren's date seemed normal enough. Peter, tall, quiet, a little awkward. He suggested dinner at a new restaurant in town. She agreed. But when they arrived, Peter led her not inside, but around the back. A side door. The room they entered wasn't a restaurant. It was a bare space with a long wooden table and 3 other men already seated staring at her. "This isn't funny," she said, backing away. Peter's face was unreadable. "Sit. They want to meet you." Lauren bolted before the men could stand, sprinting down the alley until she reached the main street. She never looked back. The next morning, Peter's profile was gone. But for weeks, she received anonymous calls late at night. Silence on the other end. Just breathing. Nowhere to hide. The common thread was control. Dates weren't dates. They were traps. Victims found themselves in locked apartments, in unfamiliar woods, in moving cars with no escape. They were treated not as people, but as prey. And yet each story shared another detail. The predators never seemed angry. They were calm, smiling. as if every step had gone exactly according to plan. For the 13 voices, this was the moment when fear shifted to terror. Because if you can't leave a date, if you're trapped, you begin to wonder if you'll ever leave at all. For the unlucky ones, the stories didn't end with a blocked number or a hurried escape into the night. Some learned the true cost of online dating, the final chapter written not in love but in horror, because obsession doesn't fade, it festers. And when predators decide you belong to them, nothing, not distance, not rejection, not even fear, will change their minds. The perfect boyfriend, Erica, had always been skeptical of dating apps, but when she met Ryan, she thought maybe she'd gotten lucky. He was attentive, always texting good morning, checking in on her day, sending flowers to her job. Her friends even said he seemed perfect. But perfection has a price. Ryan didn't like when Erica went out with friends, called constantly when she didn't answer fast enough. He tracked her social media, questioning every like, every comment. When she finally broke up with him, Ryan begged. He cried. He promised therapy. Then, when she didn't change her mind, the messages turned cold. You'll regret this. You're mine, Erica. Always. I'll see you tonight. That evening, she came home to find a photo taped to her door. It was her, sleeping in her bed, taken the night before. She never saw Ryan again, but she never slept without checking every lock, every shadow, every corner of her room. The stranger upstairs, Ben's experience was one he never speaks about, not fully. He matched with a woman named Kayla. She was flirtatious, adventurous, and invited him over almost immediately. Her apartment was small, cozy, the kind of place that smelled like candles and wine. They spent the evening talking. She poured him a drink, then another. At some point, Ben's vision blurred. He swore he saw someone moving in the hallway, tall, male, watching. When he asked Kayla, she only smiled. Don't worry about him, he likes to watch. The next thing Ben remembered was waking up in his own car, parked outside his apartment, his head pounding. His wallet was missing. So was his phone. And in the rearview mirror, written in condensation across the glass, were the words, "See you soon." The last date Claire's story is the one her friends tell for her now. She met a man named Derek. Their messages were sweet, their calls long. She told her friends she thought he might be the one. The night of their first date, she dressed in her favorite blue dress and texted her roommate when she was leaving. Wish me luck. She never came back. Police later found her car abandoned at the edge of a lake, her phone smashed in the grass. Derek's profile had been deleted. His real name was never discovered. Her friends still get messages sometimes, from numbers they don't recognize. Always the same sentence, "She's still with me." Threads in the dark, 13 voices, 13 stories, each different yet the same. The smiles on profiles that never reached the eyes, the questions that dug too deep, the places with no exits, the obsessions that turned deadly. The victims wanted connection. Instead, they found predators who saw love as ownership and affection as control. And when rejection came, the monsters didn't disappear. They lingered, waiting, watching, whispering through phones, knocking on doors, leaving reminders that safety was only an illusion. Love was supposed to be the prize. But in these stories, love twisted into something else, something sharp, hungry, and endless. Because on the dark side of online dating, there are no happy endings. Only matches that never should have been made. Only doors that never should have been opened. And only one truth. Sometimes the person you swipe right on doesn't just want your heart. They want everything, forever.